Ted Deutch. He's the CEO of the American Jewish Committee, a former Democratic congressman from Florida. Ted, thank you so much for joining us. How concerned are you about this conflict increasing anti-Semitism here in the United States?
Well, I'm concerned just because I'm watching what's happening. We're monitoring what's happening, obviously, but I'm looking at the news that CNN is broadcasting. We had just over the past week, after Hamas slaughtered 1,300, took over 150 hostage, killed dozens of Americans, injured over 3,000. Israel has a right to defend itself. The president's been clear about that. What's the response been in certain places, Wolf? On some college campuses, we saw protesters standing on the side of Hamas terrorists. That, of course, puts the Jewish community on edge. Jewish students who are sitting in class next to their classmates who may be out marching in support of the Hamas terrorists who want to kill them. Around the world, we've seen the same thing. We saw the protests. We saw the protests around the world featuring hundreds, in some cases, thousands of people, again, standing on the side of Hamas terrorists who want to kill Jews. That's why Hamas exists. And if you look at Germany, this is perhaps the most poignant of all. Wolf, in Germany, there are those who have responded to these attacks on Jews by going to Jewish homes and putting Jewish stars on their doors. And when the authorities are sought out, the response is that they're too busy. And if you can just try to wipe those off with soap and water, that might be your best bet to stay safe. Of course, we're worried about rising anti-Semitism. All started as a result of this brutal attack by a terror group bent on the destruction of Israel and the massacre of Jews.
What kind of security or safety precautions, Ted, are taking place at synagogues, at Jewish schools, at Jewish community centers around the country right now?
Well, Wolf, as you know, the Jewish Sabbath starts on Friday night and continues through the day today. Last night, I went to attend Sabbath Shabbat services. You had to have your name on a list to get through the gate to be able to pray. Let that sink in, especially for friends outside of the Jewish community who find that rightfully impossible to imagine. This morning, when I went to a different synagogue, we had to go past enhanced security and through a metal detector when we went in. This is what we're seeing all over the country. And I know, sadly, because of rising anti-Semitism in America and around the world, some in the Jewish community have just come to accept this. But with this added threat that comes with the protesters in Times Square protesting in support, marching in support of Hamas terrorists and holding up swastikas, when it comes in the form of a day of jihad being announced around the world, then the measures have to become even more pronounced, more secure, more security, making it harder for Jews simply to live their lives as Jews, which is why we're so grateful, Wolf, to so many of our friends and allies outside of the Jewish community who acknowledge the threat, who feel awful about what Israel has endured, and who want to stand with Israel on the side of humanity and decency against this terror, and with their brothers and sisters in the Jewish community who more and more find ourselves at risk.
Yeah, what is so depressing when I drive around here in Washington or in suburban Maryland or Virginia, and I drive by a Jewish center or a Jewish synagogue, and I see cop cars, a lot of cop cars right in front. I say, is this the United States? Do you need cop cars in front of synagogues like this? It is so depressing to see that. And it's not just here in the Washington, D.C. area. It's all over the country, especially where there are large Jewish populations. I'm sure down in Florida, where you are, you're seeing that as well. What concerns, Ted, do you have right now about how a drawn-out conflict in the Middle East will impact American Jews?
Well, look, first and foremost, my concern is making sure that the incredible support that Israel has received from the White House and Congress, the speech that the president gave the other day, the speech from Secretary Blinken, speech from Ambassador Thomas Greenfield, all of them speaking with such moral clarity about the importance of this moment, standing up to terror, that support and the support from from other friends and allies around the world and from the broader community around the world, that it will continue as we continue to remind people that just like the United States and any other country, Wolf, when a country is attacked by a terrorist group that comes right across from the land next door, and that comes across with the goal of wiping you out, with the goal of massacring thousands of Jews, that any country would expect their military to defend themselves. And that's the case here. And that means standing with Israel until Hamas is defeated. That's what has to happen here. Hamas must be defeated so that it can no longer wage war like that brutal attack, the worst day, the most violent, brutal attack against the Jewish community in one day since the Holocaust.
Yeah, so depressing to think about it. Former Congressman Ted Deutch, the CEO of the American Jewish Committee, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf.
Our